I'm Sam. I'm working for the Free Software Foundation Europe back there. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But first I'd like to apologise for any sniffling or coughing. I've got a cold, fortunately. So I'm going to talk about the relevance of free software to the Pirate Party movement. Freedom is something we've been discussing a lot today, and it's a very slippery word, particularly in English. It's really much more of a problem in English actually than for many other languages. But also, as pirates, you'll be aware that the trend currently regarding digital rights is not a very positive one, and freedoms are being removed, not just in terms of music and movies, but in all digital spheres really, and particularly software as well. So I was going to say, out of interest, how many people know that they're already using free software of some sort? That's really good to see. Really good to see. Cool. Yeah, just another note. When people talk about open source software and I talk about free software, we're referring to the same actual thing. The terms tend to have different connotations, but we are referring to the same thing, so don't get confused by that. I'm going to continue to refer to free software here and not open source. But when I do talk about freedom, I mean something very specific. I mean particularly four freedoms, the four freedoms, which are the freedom to use software, the freedom to study software, that is, to see how it works, investigate it, find out more about it, the freedom to share it with other people, anybody, and the freedom to improve that software and make changes to customize it and meet my needs where I see fit. Schools, employers, universities, and increasingly even our governments are requiring us to use computers for all kinds of purposes. It's not an option for people to not use lots of software to be a citizen in modern society. In some places you can't even vote without using technical systems these days. And yet, when we sit down to the keyboard, the rights which we so often take for granted really evaporate without us realizing. Most proprietary software applications, like iTunes or Windows or uTorrent even, require you to enter into an exhaustive legal agreement before you can even install the software. And typically, these agreements strip away, I mean, they're really exhaustive. They strip away all kinds of rights which some people don't even know that they had in the first place. You rarely own the copy of the program, even if you've paid for it, even if you paid thousands. You give up at least some of your rights of privacy in most cases with these license agreements. Your ability to use the application can be terminated at any point, often even remotely now. So you may just turn up one day at your desktop and something doesn't work any longer. You may only use the software in ways that the owner likes or risk facing prosecution. You can't make your own fixes or improvements, even if the company that made the software initially disappears, which could theoretically leave your experience with using it and the files that you've generated using the application redundant, which can be very expensive, apart from anything else. And I'm thinking here of applications in particular like Adobe Freehand, which left thousands of designers with lots of files that aren't supported anymore. They had to shift to another platform. This really happens. And whether non-free software or proprietary software is off the shelf, whether it's freeware or shareware, using it entails giving away your basic rights. But what about those of you who've downloaded Windows through BitTorrent, for instance, and or Usenet, and you've permanently activated it with a crack which you trust, and so you feel pretty secure because you've not paid anything, you're not too worried about whatever it being remotely disabled because you're smart and you monitor this kind of stuff and whatever you read torrent free. What does it matter to you if you don't believe the license terms will ever be enforced? How is it even relevant to talk about free software? I'm going to try and answer that question now. Firstly, accessibility is a really key issue here because as pirates, all of you have reached a certain level of technical proficiency, right? You know how to obtain and view digital content online via different methods. And not only that, but you know how to do it in a way in which the people who make it would rather you didn't. So that puts you in a particular category of actually quite skilled people. In fact, you'll all have friends and family who aren't as capable as you in these areas, and for whom you probably have to pirate stuff for and get hold of software, because for various reasons they're not able to do so. Maybe because they're not as experienced technically, or maybe because they don't have the opportunity, or perhaps their work prevents them, or they need to use it in a legal or a government setting, or who knows, some setting which would preclude that option for them. There are many people who fall into that category, the majority in fact, and we need to ask ourselves whether we're happy with the current situation, which seems to only open the gates to very empowering software and digital tools to either wealthy people or people who are technically proficient and daring enough to risk breaking the law and find it via alternative methods. Using free software not only sells out your own freedoms when you use it, but it also undermines the freedoms of everybody around you who, as a result of you using it, will be also likely using it too. You're all partaking in a system if you use non-free software, which leaves the majority of people with no choice but to either pay the full price or ask somebody else for help, which puts them at the mercy of that person's continued support. Every user of a proprietary application is a valuable person to its publisher, even if no payment has been made. In fact, groups like the Business Software Alliance and the MPAA, in fact as was published this week, are making more than ever before. So using their software or their content, it doesn't damage their profits, but it does damage your freedom. So I'd like you to ask yourself whether you'd like to continue supporting non-free applications which you use and be part of the lockout of so many people from powerful software, or whether you'd like to become part of a solution by using collaborative software which will remain free into the future. So those are some accessibility related reasons. But another issue which is really important, particularly to pirates as far as I can see, is security and trust. Because as pirates, you're obviously very unpopular with some very, very powerful people. And thousands of experts, as you know, are employed full-time to monitor and entrap people who are part of your community. Last week saw BitTorrent server seizures in the Netherlands, a Swedish file sharer being ordered to retrospectively pay for each track that he downloaded, I think $7 per track, which is wildly more than the market value. Google in court arguing with the MPAA, and countless continuing trials concerning pirates in courts all over the world.